Thank you. I'm going to do the Jeff Nuttall Memorial Greeting. Welcome to the Dock Street Theater. I'm Martha Teichner, and with me today are Anthony Roth Costanzo and Justin Vivian Bond, a.k.a. Viv.
Yes.
And I'd like a show of hands of how many people have already seen Only an Octave Apart. Oh, pretty good number. Okay, well, that helps. Let's start with the show. How many costume changes are there?
Well, there are 3 changes, meaning 4 costumes each.
Yes.
Because it's very clear, Anthony, that over the last couple of years, you've upped your wardrobe. Major league.
Well, I've been inspired, having worked with Viv over the past couple of years, who's always been a style icon. But the costumes are designed by Jonathan Anderson, who has a whole history with Viv and who designs Loewe and his eponymous line, J.W. Anderson.
But you just accused him of wearing a synthetic.
I mean, everybody gets to do what they want. These might be synthetic too. Nope. Nope, they're leather.
They're real leather. Well, it's the costumes are, if you haven't seen the show, pretty spectacular. They're amazing. How did the show happen? How did you? It's explained in part in the piece, but how did you meet? How did you put it together? How did you decide the flavor of it?
Well, one thing we don't mention in the show is that there was bribery involved.
Who bribed whom?
He bribed me with cake.
That's true. I love to bake, and Viv had said publicly that
I say it publicly all the time. 'Cause
her favorite cake is a yellow cake with pink icing. So on your birthday,
you didn't make me a yellow cake with pink
what
icing.
did I make you?
I don't know. It was some sort of delicious cake, but it wasn't.
It was a dinner party. Yeah.
It was a dinner party.
Yeah.
You invited me to where I met so many interesting, good-looking people. Anthony, when he wasn't constantly working, used to have tremendous dinner parties, which I hope will resume soon, because he's an amazing cook, which is one thing. I'm an amazing cook, but I don't do it. And he loves to do it, and so it's always nice to be invited. And of course, he also likes very good-looking, talented people, so it's always fun to have dinner at his house.
But we met that way, and then I really did, see Viv perform, and the moment, as I say in the show, the moment I saw her on stage, I thought, oh, we're missing this in classical music, in particular, the kind of energy, the kind of honesty, the kind of empathy. We get sometimes in my world, I get frustrated by the kind of, I don't know, the walls of perfection or the institution or the ideas that...
Rigidity.
You mean you don't like to be imprisoned in the 17th century?
Well, it has its advantages, but a lot of drawbacks too. So, seeing Viv really was a revelation for me, and we did perform once together, and then we formed a real friendship, and then I
came to see you at I think the first time I ever saw you sing, honestly, was at the Arts Club. I came to a recital you did there, and I don't think we knew each other, but I think Matthew brought me to see you as he brought you to see me, and I was really blown away by Anthony's voice, also by his presence, and just how unique you are.
Thank you. I mean,
which I don't use as an insult.
Today.
That's a double.
That's unique. That's what my aunt used to say if she wasn't quite approving of something. That's unique.
But I had made one album with Universal Music, and they asked for a second album, and I was thinking about what should I do? What should I do? And I thought, I don't really want to record, Scarlatti cantatas or something. There are people who do that better than me. So I kept thinking and thinking, and then it occurred to me one day that maybe I should ask Viv if she would do something. And we did start talking about that, and that's where the conversation began. And
we had dinner with the record company people. They seemed excited. Steven Schwartz was at the next table with some prostitute friends of mine, and I took that to be a good sign.
And I asked
And what was that? Which restaurant?
What restaurant was that?
That was called, it's this little French place, Chez Napoleon.
Chez
on,
Napoleon.
Oh, right, 42nd Street.
42nd Street. But I had asked a long, long time collaborator of mine and a friend of me and Viv, Zach Winiker, to join us in shaping the show and directing it. And Zach is not only brilliant at creating the visual picture, but in putting together our ideas and helping us combine them, and then helping us communicate those ideas to institutions and partners and things like that. So,
and to each other, really.
And to each
Because
other.
we have a real simpatico, but once in a while, you just need a third person to sort of hold the mirror up and see that in a certain way we're looking at the same thing, but just from different angles.
But I
And
would
so-
argue that there are no other two people who could do this show or anything quite like it, because you two are the personalities you are. And how do you turn that into part of the DNA of the show?
Well, I think as far as me personally, my way of performing is to just try. The only thing I think is original is a mistake. And so I'm really into making a lot of mistakes, or allowing myself to make mistakes. And also the only thing I can do that's unique is tell my own personal truth. Otherwise, it's replication. I mean, even when I cover a song or sing somebody else's song, the reason I'm singing it is because it means something to me and it expresses a part of who I am. And I think that Anthony, being in the opera world, was feeling confined by the choice, I don't mean to speak for you, but was feeling confined by just the nature of that art form. And so for us to work on it together was a way of finding a way of expressing his truth through that art form, and blending the two together made it somehow more liberating for both of us, I think. And also the joy and pleasure of being artists who usually work separately and don't work with our really good friends, to work with somebody who you're so close to and have such a friendship and blend your art in that way is really kind of a gift.
That sounds all very serious, but this is a very irreverent and sometimes really fun and silly show.
Well, that's because that's who we are.
But how do you rehearse? You can't rehearse all of that. I mean, how do you generate that so that, because it has a very spontaneous kind of feel in the show?
I mean, this has been a journey for me, because Viv improvises all the time and speaks and is as a part of her shows, and that is less my discipline. So when we were putting it together, there was this tension between me saying, well, but what do we do here, and what's this pillar, and how do we arrive? And Viv saying, well, we can't fix everything in stone. We just have to kind of see how it goes. So we've managed to find a balance so that I know the sort of bigger pillars we're heading toward, but there's room for improvisation in between. And then when we started to do the show more frequently, we did it first at St. Anne's Warehouse and then in London and with the New York Philharmonic and in Philadelphia. I have learned from the master and also gotten more comfortable letting go, which actually affects my singing.
In what way?
Zach, our director, always talks about, this is a hard garment to demonstrate in, but my shoulders going up and me being too tense, you know what I mean? And that physicality is somehow linked to the idea of needing everything to go exactly as it's been planned and rehearsed. As soon as you can let go of that, you're also letting go inside your body in some way, and that allows different sounds to emerge. The best example I remember is we were trying to finish the show frantically at St. Anne's Warehouse. And we have an incredible musical team. Daniel Schlossberg here is our music director, who's amazing and a polymath. And Thomas Bartlett, the music supervisor, was helping us put the album together and get the show
and
created.
I was comfortable with him because he, even though it's a different kind of genre and a different kind of record label, he produced my 2 solo records, Thomas. And so bringing him on helped sort of also gel things for us.
And Thomas had said, we were singing the very last number, and he said, well, the ending just kind of goes, and it needs something. And I said, well, what if instead of going ba-da-da, I went up the octave at the end? And he said, yeah, that would be great. So I sang it in the rehearsal, and then I said, what note is that? And it was about 4 notes higher than the highest note I usually vocalize to. And, well, we've kept it in, and I can still do it in this context, but I'm not sure I've ever done it anywhere else.
And also, when we first started working, you were anxious about the improv, and so it really became a matter of trust, because Anthony was afraid that he would look silly or stupid on stage, and I just, said to him, no matter what, I will do everything I can to make you not look stupid. You know what I mean? That we were there for each other.
Provoke him.
I could easily make anybody look stupid on stage. So I had to promise him that I wouldn't, and I don't think I ever have. And
Yeah.
I might have looked stupid, but
But you
that's
obviously
how this show
sort
goes.
of play off each other, and with you, I don't know, would you consider your senses of humor similar? Or radically opposed or different, and that's what works?
I don't
I
know.
don't
That's
know.
a
We
good
do
question.
make each other laugh, but I don't know if it's because our sense of humors are similar, but we can appreciate each other's senses of humor.
I feel we have a slightly different energy or something like that, which is complementary, and that
He's much
extends
more
really.
serious about structures, and I'm much more serious about feelings. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah.
Yeah, because your mind works in a different way, and mine's more circular, and yours is more linear.
Right. What that allows for, though, is it means that I can sort of see the flight plan in my head, and you don't have to think about that so much because you know I'm there for that. And whereas
I'm thinking about the luggage.
yeah. And if I were to just be alone on stage, the flight plan can be really quite dry. So Viv can sort of shake me out of that mentality.
Well, has it ever gone seriously wrong?
No,
No.
because like I say, mistakes are one. I mean, sometimes technically it goes wrong, and I don't even know how I'm able to do it, but I can make an eye roll go thousands of feet. So sometimes we have issues technically, but I mean, the mistakes are, as I say, they're fine. I think they're fun.
So
But-
you just turn them into...
Yeah, just go
Well,
with it.
Viv is really amazing at that. There's never a moment of anything that has happened that I could imagine going wrong, because it would immediately become more elevated and more...
And Waters of March, which I obviously messed up last night. I have intentionally never learned that song because I just think it would be so much less interesting if I did. And I never know when I'm going to mess up or where in the song I'm going to mess up. And it was true that one night I did get it right because I thought that would be a good idea. And that is the night that Anthony messed up.
No matter what, whether you're messing up or getting it right at an unexpected moment, it always keeps me on my toes.
Now, I'm curious, because you mentioned there were a couple of little kind of nudges toward the political climate. Last night you talked about a hate state and so on. It occurs to me that, I mean, I know you're trans, that this is not drag, but in at least Tennessee and possibly a number of other states going forward, would this show be considered illegal?
I think they just struck down that law because it's
part of it,
it's
yeah.
not constitutional. I mean, whether it's illegal or not is, I don't know. I do know that they're doing everything they can to prevent us from having the medical care that we need, to prevent people from having the hormone replacement therapy, to just do everything they can to erase the possibility of being trans. So that's not just illegal to perform, that's illegal to exist. That's illegal to have the right to pursue happiness.
And I will just say that, you know, I was born in North Carolina, and bringing this show here to South Carolina, after having come here many times, is again a revelation in terms of thinking about context and actually confronting these issues of identity, which are so fundamental in this larger context. And I think seeing the human being on stage is such a revelation. I also just want to point out that in those states where drag performances are banned, I've recently found out that it would also be illegal to perform The Marriage of Figaro or The Rosenkavalier or operas, of which there are hundreds.
Shakespeare plays.
Because of people
Because
dressing
they're in drag.
opposite, yeah,
That's what they
sure.
are. They're
So
dressed
the
as the opposite.
idiocy is unbound.
And of course, the first thing I thought of was, my Lord, Dame Edna would be illegal.
Yeah.
Right, and she was pretty conservative, almost fascistic.
Yes.
Definitely transphobic and certainly a misogynist.
Right. Well,
And racist.
so does the show, is it just a show for its own sake, or is there some sort of thought, message that people need to go away with?
I don't think that we have any prescriptive message for anyone to go away with, and we certainly didn't go about creating the show saying, we're going to make sure that this point comes across, and we're going to make sure that they feel this when they leave the theater. This is an expression of who we are. I think what occurs to me after we made it, to be honest, is that when you take who you are into this large crossed over public context, you know, we're in Spoleto, we're in classical context, we're in theatrical context, it takes on layers of meaning. And so a song like Don't Give Up, which we just thought was a good song to do, starts when I mean, I remember the story, we rehearsed it, we recorded it, then we went into the booth and we listened to the recording. And we both started to get tears in our eyes because it occurred to us what it would be like for someone who didn't have what we have, which is the privilege of knowing ourselves and loving ourselves, that this could be meaningful to them, and that was very moving to think about.
And what we had to overcome to be where we are. The first time I played it, I had a dinner party, and I just played that song and a couple of songs off the record, and my house guests were all sitting there bawling at dinner, and I realized I can't play that at dinner parties anymore.
Have your entire guest list in tears. But it's a very moving song. Now,
it just takes on it has almost been a moving song, but it takes on a very different context with us performing it. And in a situation like this, in a state like this, where it is so difficult for people to actually be able to actively love and take care of their children, it does become much more meaningful, I think.
And I'll just say one other thing which I enjoy, which is the humor with which it's not all tears and pain.
Oh, it's hilarious.
And so, a sequence like what we call the Singing in the Rain sequence, where Viv starts coming on and saying, have you ever wondered what it would be like to be normal? And then
Which I think would be wonderful.
And then we proceed to stand behind the curtain for each other and be each other's voices so we can sound the way we look. And then I say, well, I want to try and do both things at once and see what it's like, and wind up, running myself in circles. There's meaning layered in that, whatever it is to you, and it's funny, but it's not insignificant.
For those of you who haven't seen it, what Anthony does is that he plays the female part, and then he runs around the curtain and plays the male part, and he doesn't sing in that sense in a countertenor voice. He sings in a tenor
Baritone,
or
yeah.
baritone, and so it's obvious that you can do that. But the question then becomes, how the hell did you end up a countertenor?
Well, we were talking about this the other day. I started as a kid singing musical theater. When I was 11, I did it professionally on Broadway. I had all this success singing in this high voice. And so when you have that, you don't want to lose it. And I got asked to do my first opera when I was 13, which was The Turn of the Screw by Benjamin Britten. And as I was singing that surrounded by opera people, somebody said, maybe you're a countertenor. And I had no idea what that was, but I looked it up. And then some voice teacher helped me continue to sing high. And I had 2 psychologist parents, so they thought it was great. They
were
thought,
like, let's keep this money milking cow going.
that's very much how they are. You know them. No, they thought it was great, and nobody around me in my close circle, and I was fairly resilient, thought, well, you should be a man, man up, sing in your low voice, don't sing in that girly way. And so I continued singing high. But I think, and by exercising that falsetto range, it stayed. And it could stay for any man. It stays for lots of men. We hear pop singers of all kinds, of all decades, singing in that falsetto voice.
The Frankie Valli and the Bee Gees, there are bunches.
Michael Jackson, Prince,
Jake
Justin
Shears.
Timberlake, Jake Shears. Many pop singers of all time sing in that voice. So clearly, any man can do that, depending on your natural ability, like anything. But I think a lot of people don't, because there is some societal norm that we feel we must be a part of.
Well, also, some guys really want to be guys.
That's true.
They want to be butch like that.
Which is great.
Mm-hmm. For someone.
So, when you were growing up and you said in your circle around you didn't have nobody had any issues with that. Did you ever have any issues with that in school or in just socially or anything? Did you go through things on the route to where you are now and perfectly comfortable expressing who you are?
I think it's been a journey for sure. And when I was in 9th and 10th grade in North Carolina, I remember pulling up wearing all black and seeing all the other boys in khaki shorts and white T-shirts and thinking,
Hot.
I've always been very adaptive, and my response to being in that environment where I didn't quite feel welcome was to start the cooking club, which garnered a group of mostly girls, but a couple of guys. And we used to do these waffle sales for charity. And we'd make these waffles, and all the jocks loved the waffles. So they would come get the waffles. And then it became, I became a sort of...
Waffle boy.
Waffle boy. I was okay. I figured it out. But I was fairly lucky that way.
Hey, waffle boy.
Hey, waffle boy.
Shall we go to the Waffle House?
Let's go out behind the Waffle House, waffle boy.
It wasn't quite like that
Well,
as I
I'm
remember
sorry.
it. But no, sounds nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think, interestingly, because I never struggled that much in my teenage years, it was later, as I went into my 30s, that I realized I was sort of missing a connection to the rest of the queer community in some way, and that I wasn't sort of making that as much a part of myself as I wanted it to be. And so, yeah, I think we all discover these things at different times.
And so what did you do?
I think that I naturally sort of found a group of people in New York and friends and artistic circles, and then eventually ways of artistically expressing my identity, which feel really true. And when they're true, again, they're freer, and the music making and the performing connects to people.
It seems as if you have a natural need to perform, that's just part of your personality. And when I think of countertenors I've heard in the past, they seem to come out of the 16th or 17th century or 18th century, do their thing, and then they get the tissue paper folded back up and get put back in that box like Christmas ornaments after Christmas. But you've never been willing to do that. You've always refused to just stay in that kind of period countertenor track.
Yeah, I have an unusual timbre and an unusual voice, and also a strong will as a Taurus. And I don't really want to be confined in any way. But also, if I were confined, I wouldn't have a career. You know, the Met doesn't do an opera every season that has a countertenor in it, nor does any major opera house. And so what am I going to do? You know, there are countertenors who go around and they do these little things here and there, but I wanted something bigger than that. I'm an ambitious person
Very ambitious.
to a fault.
I don't think you're ambitious to a fault.
Well, thank you. But I mean, yeah, I want the biggest stage I can get. And that it was clear to me early on when I got into the firmament of opera and came from the inside in my lane, that was only going to go so far for a countertenor. If I were a soprano, if I were a tenor, I could have done more with something in the lane. But it was clear that wasn't going to be my path.
But I think you probably had more fun, too.
Oh, God,
I mean,
yes.
the countertenor repertoire is relatively limited.
Absolutely, but there are lots of ways to embroider it and to, you know, enliven it. And yeah, this is much more fun, and it speaks to a much larger audience because you're using the same technique. I don't alter my technique to sing the songs that we sing together that aren't from the 18th century, but you use the same technique and the same voice, and you're just giving people different points of access to it.
What was your route? I think you had a very different route from Anthony in terms of acceptance and finding yourself.
Well, no, I always knew who I was. I just had the sense to hide it because I was in enemy territory. But I knew from the very beginning of my life that I wanted to be a singer, that I wanted to perform. When I was at my aunt's funeral a couple weeks ago, my cousin, we were born 3 months apart, and she said, well, I guess of all the people in the family who've changed the most, you are the one who's changed the most. I said, in what way have I changed? I think I've probably not changed at all since we were children. Now I get to do what I want to do. And she was like, oh yeah, because she was a tomboy, and I was quote unquote a sissy, and so we would play together, and she would always play like a paramedic, and I would play the nurse because we loved that show Emergency. Or our favorite thing to do was to be orphans, and I was the teenage sister and she was the teenage brother, and then we'd make my sister and her little brother be the kids, and we just picked on them, and made them do everything we wanted them. But anyway, I basically was exactly the same. I just had a contest of wills between my father and my mother until I finally won.
And you told me that you left right after high school. I mean,
I did. I left I got a job at the beach, and I left the day after I graduated from high school. I mean,
This was where?
This was 1981.
In what state? Where
In
was-
Maryland. So I went from high school to working as a cook at a Christian church camp in Bethany Beach, Delaware. But believe me, it wasn't oppressive. And back then you could drink at the age of 18, so I really took advantage of that.
Did you have in your mind singers that you saw as images of what you wanted to be like, or who you admired?
Well, one day I was on my way to work at the Dairy Queen when I was 16, and this song, Broken English, came on by Marianne Faithfull, and I just skipped and drove past the Dairy Queen because I wasn't going to go into the parking lot until that song was done, because I'd never heard anything like it, and I just was immediately taken by that raspy, powerful, defiant voice of Marianne Faithfull. Same way with Patti Smith, and also Melanie, who sang. She's famous for Brand New Key, but the songs that I like of hers were songs like "Look What They've Done to My Song, Ma," and "Candles in the Rain," because her voice was a voice that wasn't trying to sound beautiful; it was trying to convey feeling, and so I was always into trying to use my voice to convey the emotions that I was experiencing. And but my favorite singer at that time growing up it was Judy Collins. And so I sort of was
I knew
kind of
every
trying
single
to,
Judy Collins song.
I knew every Judy Collins song, and she was like my sort of mental babysitter. You know, when I was down, I would go put on her records, and they just soothed me. So she was sort of like my vocal mother, if you will. But yeah, I wanted to express emotion. And one funny story is I went to college with Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent, and we used to do these cabaret productions in college, and I was usually cast in those because they really didn't have many roles that they felt they could cast me in. But one day we were at rehearsal, and he was teaching me some song, and he said, "Can you hit these notes directly?" I said, "You mean you want me to sing on key?" He said, "Yes." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, do it for me." So I sang this song, Pitch Perfect, and then he said, "Wow, you really can." I was like, "Did you like it?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, hold on to it, because you're never going to hear me sing like that again."
That's funny. When I think of say cabaret singers, I was thinking in getting ready for this, I was thinking, well, the imperfect voice seems to be a better tool or a better vehicle for cabaret singing than a perfect voice.
Well, how can you really focus on what you are feeling or what you're trying to express emotionally if you're so busy trying to make your body make this one specific sound, which I think, I mean, to be perfectly honest, is why a lot of times opera is so boring, because the performers just stand there and worry about how they sound, and they're not really, I mean, this is why I kind of love, and I have become a big opera fan, but why I love more contemporary operas, because they are telling a story to a modern audience, and the singers, I think, can relate to the characters in a way that makes it easier to believe them as they sing their roles.
I had the good fortune to interview Margaret Whiting several times before she died, and before she kind of drifted off into, well, even after she sort of drifted off into dementia. But,
Well, I'm counting on my audience just putting up with that.
But Margaret Whiting, and I think of Marilyn May, and these are women in their, well, Margaret Whiting's dead now, but
Marilyn May's 95.
Yeah, that's what I was about
And
to
still
mention.
at it.
And she's still at it, and she's still good.
Oh, amazing.
And it's a question of why they're good. Why do you think they're still that she's still good at 95?
I think it's because she absolutely 100%, like me, loves what she does. She loves it. I mean, and that's the thing. You can't sing and sell a show to an audience when you're 95 if you don't love it. I mean, there's no, and that, I mean, the two things that keep me going are vanity, and the reason I'm so vain is because I like to work. So vanity and performing are the only two things that would keep me from, you know, eating ice cream and pizza every night and drinking myself into oblivion probably. But those, my career puts the brakes on any sort of really negative behavior.
Does, and this is a sort of a rhetorical question, I guess, but does a cabaret singer have to be glamorous? Or should they be?
I don't know. All I know is that I love glamour. Glamour is magic to me, and I just would not even want to get on stage if I couldn't wear fabulous clothes and get my hair done. And I mean, I just think that's really fun. That's pleasure for me. I don't think it's necessary, but I mean, I know a lot of people who perform that don't really worry about how they look, and they're amazing because their instruments are so incredible and what they have to say. But for me, I like a pretty dress. I mean, my ideal life is to just, you know, travel around the world and sing the songs that I want in beautiful theaters and gorgeous dresses. That's all I want.
Do you think that
I mean, you know, professionally.
right. Do you think that the audience reacts differently if there's glamour?
I don't know. I've never performed when there wasn't glamour.
I mean, I suspect that they do.
I'll tell you this much. I've always found that I was like, you know what? The gays love a polished fingernail. If I go on stage and I haven't done my nails, I feel like there's a less enthusiastic response. I could have everything done, my hair done, my makeup, my, you know, beautiful shoes, and if my nails aren't polished, I just feel like the response is a little bit more tempered.
That's funny. That's really funny.
And it's true. It's true. It is ridiculous, but I do believe it.
For many years, you were best known because of Kiki and Herb. Talk about Kiki and Herb. Explain how that all came to be and who was Kiki?
Well, there's a lot of roads that led to that character, but when I was in San Francisco and I was singing like I do now, much more as myself and wearing, you know, being glamorous and being trans, but being perceived as a drag queen because there was no language other than sex changes or, you know, transsexual was barely used. Oh, she's a sex change or whatever. And I didn't really know how to express myself, and I was treated in a certain way as like you would treat a drag queen. Like I was always supposed to be sassy and, you know, basically erase any sort of vulnerability. And it made me feel very vulnerable. And so one night, my friend Miss X, who was a drag queen, gave me this dress that belonged to this queen named Ambisextress, who had passed away. And it had these huge birdseed titties in it. She's like, you have to have this dress. I don't want that dress. I'll never wear that dress. Just take it. The dress looks great on you. Someday you'll want it. Take it. I don't want it. We argued. Finally, I was like, okay. So one night I was supposed to go to this party to perform for this guy's birthday, and I was just feeling really put upon, and like, you know, I was being asked to be something I wasn't. And so I looked in the mirror, and I'll be honest, I had smoked a little marijuana, and I was listening to The Cure, and I looked in the mirror and I thought, well, if these faggots want a crazy fucked up queen, I'll give them a crazy fucked up queen. And so I started drawing lines on my face, and I put on this fright wig, and I got that dress, and the boobs were really saggy, and I just took on this character that was based on my friend Nancy's mother, who when I met she had been a dancer in Baltimore in the 50s, and she, when I met her, was dying of cancer. But she was one of those people that when they look at you, you can just tell that they see every amount of bullshit that you have, and they see right through it, and you're like, oh my God, I can't act any way but real in front of this woman. And she also was very astute politically. When she was dying, she was in a turban, laying on this bed with blood-red fingernails, no hair, watching CNN, and she said to me, you know, the saddest day of my life was the day John Hinckley missed. If I had the strength, I'd go down to Washington and shoot that son of a bitch myself. And I was like, so that spirit of that woman is what I took with me into that character. And she really, and it was the time of AIDS, so it was really a time where I could then become invulnerable as this character and as a sort of 20-something person who, if I talked about AIDS and what my community was going through, I would have been earnest and nobody would have cared. But playing a 66-year-old alcoholic woman who's like making all these off-color jokes but actually getting to the heart of the matter made it possible, and it didn't hurt that we were on magic mushrooms for all of our performances, and then the audience found out, so they all started coming to our shows.
So she was cover, in a way, for a lot of
Yes, she
things.
was glamouflage, if you will.
And I saw some reference to her as the boozy Shantuzzi. And did she sing off-key? Did she sing badly? Or, I mean, what, for those people who don't know what Kiki and Her, what the act was like.
Well, we were really interested in capturing the spirit of duende. And so I sang very hard. Duende is this like a Central American style of singing that is capturing the fire and the spirit of the art of singing. It wasn't about being beautiful, it was about communicating very deep, profound emotions. And so that was what we were aiming for. And so my character sang really loud, she sang really quiet, she screamed, sometimes she was on key, sometimes she was completely not off key, not on key, sometimes just would, if I like to think, make people cry, make people feel things. And then at a certain point in the night, I would go over and I would kick open the window of the place where we were performing, and the wind, because it was San Francisco, the wind would come in and the curtains would be flying, and I'd just scream out the window, "Don't get too comfortable!" And it was effective.
But it wasn't just in San Francisco that you were.
No,
Kiki
I did that very
was a
same
world
thing
traveler.
at Carnegie Hall. I kicked open the door and screamed, "Don't get too comfortable." And all the ushers were outside on the other side of the door. I scared them so badly. They weren't expecting that.
Who came to see Kiki and Herb?
Well, when we first started, activists and queer people in San Francisco, and then word spread, and mostly intelligent people with good taste.
Did Kiki and Herb, or at least Kiki, evolve over? Because you did Kiki for many years.
15 years, yeah. Well, when we got to New York, we stopped taking the hallucinogenic drugs. We were like, you know what, we better up our game here in New York. So we stopped doing that. And then, eventually we found a following in this place called Flamingo East. We were there for 2 years. Then we moved to the Fez underneath the Time Cafe, and we were there for 2 years doing like 3 or 4 shows a night. And then somebody had the bright idea that we should do off-Broadway, which had been a goal for me. And so we took a pay cut and did off-Broadway for 150 performances. And then I was like, I'm done with this. Right when we were about to, we were taking off. And somebody said, well, what would you do? What would it take to get you back on stage? Where would you like to perform? And I said, Carnegie Hall, thinking that would never happen. And they were like, we think we can make that happen. And so we sold out Carnegie Hall, and then I went to London a week later to do my master's degree and found myself in the International Students' Luncheon eating biting into a frozen samosa and thinking, what the hell have I done? But I finished that, and then I needed to pay my degree off, so I agreed to do Broadway. So we did Broadway, and then we did Carnegie Hall again, and then I stopped.
Emerging from that character, were you different as a result of having had that cover for those years?
Well, Kiki was born of rage and frustration when we were at a time when the government clearly didn't care, if not were actively making policies that would cause us to die. So I had a lot of rage and a lot of anger, which I encapsulated for other people of my generation that were feeling the same way, which is why a lot of activists came. I performed and hosted the first AIDS, International AIDS Conference that happened in the United States. I was the sort of, my friend and I, we were the kind of, entertainment for the troops, if you will. But by the time 2004, 2005, 2006, I was tired of having to be angry all the time. And so I was in San Francisco. We were doing ACT with our Broadway show. We went right after we lost the Tony. And I was just like, kind of done. And I met this adorable young, I was 44, I met this adorable young 24-year-old queer San Franciscan who just brought me back to my roots, brought me back to what I loved about my community. And I just went, I just got in a car and went to this place in Canada for a queer anarchist, anti-capitalist event in the woods, and I spent...
That seems like that doesn't seem to be something that you do there in the woods.
Well, you'd be surprised how many rules anarchists have.
Really?
But it brought me back to who I was and what I loved about myself, and I credit him with saving my life. And then we went on to be lovers for 8 years, and I just was able to walk away and just start again and just reconnect with what I loved and who I am. And you can do that when you're surrounded by people that remind you of that and aren't expecting you to be something you're not because they need you to be, because that is what serves their life.
Now, Kiki was a character, but you came out, you as trans, after sort of
I came out as trans in 1990 when I was on tour with my friend Kate Bornstein. We did this, at the time, groundbreaking play called Hidden Agenda, and I played the 19th century French character Herculine Barbin, whose diaries were found by Michel Foucault. And she was an intersex person that was who was raised as a girl and then forced to be a man because the doctor said she was more male than female, and ended up committing suicide. And Kate was a trans woman who had transitioned from being the first mate on L. Ron Hubbard's yacht to being a lesbian woman. And so she wrote this play, and we toured around in it, and I almost didn't take the role because I just knew everybody was going to know my truth after that. And I was afraid of that because I knew I was going to give up a lot of privilege. I thought I was going to give up a lot of sex because I didn't think any of the gay boys or anybody was going to want to have sex with this, trans person. And I was afraid, but I did, and I came out, and I used to refer to myself as a non-op transsexual because I knew what I was, but I've never felt like I had to prove anything to anybody. And a lot of times, they require people to have surgery so that they can get the gender markers they want. I mean, I don't care what any piece of paper says about me or how anybody perceives me. I just know who I am. I feel like we all, if we really focus, know who we are, and these, what I call the suitcases that carry our souls around may give indications to other people that we want them to have, but at the end of the day, that's gone, and you're still you when you ascend. So that's my take on it. I don't care.
you almost created a form of describing trans people that is not they or them. Talk about
Right.
that.
Well, when I decided at a certain point that I needed to be more aggressively, for political reasons, not really so much for personal reasons, because I felt like I owed it to my community, and I felt like in a certain level I owed it to myself. I felt like I was maybe taking an easy way, and I didn't want to transition to be a woman, because I felt like then I would be lying just as much as if I said that when people require me to say I'm a man, or people refer to me as Mr. Bond in the New York Times. It just upset me. And so I thought, well, I just have to kind of find a way to express that I am not one thing or the other, that I'm both. So I decided to take the honorific mix, MX, because that basically literally says what I am, a mix of genders. And then I was going to use the pronoun V, because it was two lines that met in the middle, and they were equal. But I also chose the name Vivian, which then undercut the V, because people thought that the V stood for Vivian, when in fact it could have been V, he, she, and V instead of he, she, and they, but it didn't take off.
I think people are a little bit confused by they and them sometimes.
I think people are just confused in general.
So what's the future of Only an Octave Apart? You've played it a lot of times. Is it just sort of sort of here and then it gets put aside for a while, or does it have a tour?
We're doing it in Ireland in September, and you'll have to ask the ambitious one. I'm merely here to help raise Anthony's profile.
I'm grateful for that. I'd like to take everything as far as it can go in life, generally. And so I think what's been remarkable about even just last night in Spoleto is that I think in our own ways we were both nervous about being here and doing this show and not knowing how people would respond to it, because New York and London, Philadelphia.
Those are our people.
Those are our people. We know those people. We know the audiences who come to see us. So it was very moving to see people not only respond positively, but at certain moments take in, without a response, what was happening on stage. And I think that energizes me as much as the fear is demotivating or de-energizing. The response is energizing, and I think it makes it feel like it's something that we should and can continue. And also, more importantly than all of that, I love being with Viv. I love performing with Viv. I love what our music, respectively, and our voices do for each other. I think we kind of both elevate each other when we're together. So it feels like something that we should continue to do. And also, last but not least, in a moment when certain people have taken trans rights and the trans experience as a tool they can use to manipulate their political fortunes or whatever it might be.
To raise money, basically.
To raise money. I feel it's really important to see the human beings and the experience and think about gender and pitch and, what you're seeing and what you're hearing in a way that is not, I don't feel that we're preaching anything in the show, although, the discussion might be different, but I don't feel that in the show we're preaching anything. I feel we're just being who we are. So if there's a place on television for that, or streaming, et cetera, if there's a place on stages or larger stages, I'm going to go after it and try and get it.
As long as there's nice hotels and good restaurants nearby.
And Charleston does have good restaurants.
Yeah,
So.
and
Yes.
probably some pretty nice
We
hotels
had a
too.
delicious dinner last night.
Yeah, Fig. We loved that.
Oh, you did go.
Right,
That's
it's
glad to
good,
hear
yeah.
that.
Who knew eggplant could be so good?
Their gnocchi, whatever flavor gnocchi they do, is really good. Do you at times acknowledge feeling? Do you feel uncomfortable, or do you feel good when you hear a kind of an uncomfortable kind of laugh in the audience?
I've never heard one. Have you?
I don't think so, no. I think sometimes something lands more than it does somewhere else. But that's true in New York or London when we did the show 22 times. Sometimes you'd have a joke that we always thought would land, or a bit that would land really well, and it just wouldn't land. So I tend not to read that much into it. But I think and I have to say, I don't think yet we've had an audience that we felt was hostile towards us.
No.
In any way.
But I mean, in my own shows, I definitely elicit groans a lot, which is gratifying. Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I like confrontation in life in general. I tend to be a confrontational person, I would say.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, not aggressively so, but I just say it like it is. And if someone has, owes me something or is doing something wrong, I will confront them about it. So I tend to be confrontational, and I don't mind confronting the audience in that sense.
What are you thinking about saying?
I'm thinking about the fact that this Spoleto Festival owes him a lot of money that they're not giving him. And so
That's another
the confrontation that you're in the midst of right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Being screwed by the man.
Ooh, uh-oh. So you're in the fall after you finish here. What are you doing next and next and next?
What am I doing next? Well, I hope, first of all, if I'm going to plug things, that everybody here comes to New York for the run of Gluck's Orfeo at the Metropolitan Opera. Thank you.
I'll be in the audience screaming, no!
No, exactly. No. But that is one of my dream roles, so I'm thrilled to be able to do that at the Met at the end of next season. But before that, I'll be the artist in residence at Glimmerglass singing Handel. I will be in Madrid. I'll be at Carnegie Hall. I'll be I can't even remember making my Paris opera debut singing Thomas Adès.
Which I love that opera. I'm going to be there.
Yeah, we're going to have fun in Paris eating.
Because I'm friends with Thomas and his husband. I've known since the punk rock days of London. So that's always
So
fun.
you're going to Paris?
Oh, yeah.
Unless I'm, doing something that I can't.
And what are you doing next?
Well, next week I start a series of 8 Pride shows at Joe's Pub, and then I'm going to headline the Manchester Festival July 6th, and I'm a visual artist also. So I might start to paint because I've just been so busy performing. I did, during the pandemic, I did a show, and I have had several shows at galleries and work in the new museum. And just this past spring, one of my pieces was acquired by the Victoria and Albert.
Really?
For their permanent collection.
Wow.
So I'm going to between July 6th and September, I'm either going to do absolutely nothing but sit around, eat ice cream, play with my cats, or I might paint. But then I have Dublin, and then I've got a series of 8 shows at Joe's Pub in November. Then we're in negotiations for Kiki and Herb tour leading up until Christmas, and then I'll do my Christmas run at Joe's Pub because I love performing at Joe's Pub because I can just walk to work, and that's just the greatest thing ever to just. I walked to school when I was a kid, and I like walking to work and then walking home and being in my house. So I don't really like touring, but I do it for money.
Yeah, well, I'm going to open this up for questions, and I wonder if you could bring the house lights up a little bit so I can see people's hands, raising hands for questions. I see someone at 1, 2, 3, 4 rows back. They're going to hand you a microphone. You, yes.
Thank you. It's actually a couple of comments I wanted to make about the show last night. First of all, it was beautiful the way you traded between the popular and the classic. And I wanted to congratulate Anthony on so underhandedly and insidiously introducing the audience to some beautiful oratorio and operatic repertoire. I mean, and then finally, your teacher was right. It is hairline to hairline, 'cause that includes the brain, and that includes your belly, which includes a lot of breath. So it was a beautiful show and lots of insight on all sorts of areas. And thank you for putting it together.
Thanks for saying that.
Thank you.
There's a lady over, yeah, you.
Tell us how you came to have the show only an octave apart.
Well, the title came from.
Initially, it was going to be called How to Get High. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
That's true?
Yeah, it was going to be called How to Get High because, you know, he sings high and and it seemed clever, but then we did the song only an octave apart, but we didn't put it on the album, but it just seemed like such a good title.
And that came from Carol Burnett and Julie Andrews at Carnegie Hall. It was a song that was written for their special in the 50s.
It
that was
their opening
televised.
number in the 70s.
70? Well, yeah. In any case, that song, I just loved it, and it perfectly encapsulates, you know, not only our vocal ranges, but, you know, it implies a certain proximity in terms of our friendship.
And it's really fun to perform.
Yeah, I would think it would be a lot of fun, especially if things go wrong.
Well, we were supposed to be wearing our cars that we wore in London, but they went wrong, so we had to put our pointy outfits back on.
Tell us about the pointy outfits. Those were the strangest.
There are these weird armatures underneath. Jonathan did a collection several seasons ago, and it's just, you know, would have just been a gorgeous chic sheath, but then you have these like points coming out of them, and I just thought that they looked really beautiful, and so I asked if we could wear those dresses, and so they made us 2 or 3 of each.
I love the way you were resting your arm on the corner. It's like having a house under your clothes.
Yeah, it's the architecture of it, and it's fun. I just think they're kind of silly. They look glamorous but silly, which is, I think, what the show can be.
But they're very funny. They really are.
Couple over here.
I see Annie.
Hi. So about 10 years ago, Graham and I were eating in Orzo, and at the next table were the Martins. That's how we refer to them. And it was Steve Martin and Martin Short. And we eavesdropped, as one does, and listened to them plan their show. And last night, as I was watching you, I was thinking about the friendship between the two of them and the friendship between the two of you, and how impeccable it is, and how you play off of each other. And it was just truly brilliant. And so I just wanted to thank you so much. I mean, we were thrilled that you brought this show to Charleston.
Thank you.
And what you have done for Spoleto.
I'm excited to be here because I'd never been to Charleston before, so it's nice. I like it.
So
I
far,
didn't know what the sinister politics were, I'd actually be able to enjoy myself a lot more because it's pretty nice.
Charleston is a sort of, it's an isolated, it's like an island, and then there's part of the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And,
I'm used to that.
Mm-hmm.
I see you over here.
Thank you. I haven't watched your show. I will come tonight to see it. But I have a question because, you know, I guess the cause behind the show is very important, even if it's arranged thought or not. So you were saying coming to Charleston, who knew what would have been the reaction? It's not New York, it's not Philadelphia, etc. So I understand that in order to put up a show, you need a lot of money, but wouldn't that be a good thing to go around exactly in those famous areas in the United States where maybe the show could not be well accepted, but maybe could teach something or could open the eyes of some young people? I don't know.
Absolutely. I think that would be wonderful. I mean, I don't know where my next Kiki and Herb tour is going to go, but I've always wanted to do that. And when we did Hidden Agenda, which was in 1990, we went to very obscure places. And the first place we went was Northern California, up near the Oregon border, and I can't remember the name of the small town, but it was the first place we'd done it outside of San Francisco. And we went into the bar across from the theater afterward, and all these people were in there talking about the show, and we got into this great discussion about gender and all of that in the bar. So then we decided, oh, well, maybe it would be a good idea to just have conversation, because people were not hostile, but these are new concepts for them. And so we started having conversations after every show, and we went to universities, we went to places like PS 122 in New York, but we really played for a huge variety of people in different places, and it was really informative for us, but it was also nice to see how open people were to these ideas, because once they heard them, they just, made perfect sense. It's like, which is why I think they clamped down on language so much, the, really conservative fascist right, because we all know these things in our evolution as human beings, as spiritual beings, but our knowledge and understanding supersedes the language. And so if you can cut off the language, you can somehow prevent the evolution, and that's where the struggle is. That's why they are passing that legislation in Florida. That's what it's not about protecting children, it's about stopping progress.
Do you see backtracking? Do you see backtracking?
I mean, people, once you know something, you can't unlearn it unless it's just for convenience, and it's a way for you to then assert a level of power over other people to make. You can pretend you're as ignorant as you want everyone else to be, but if you are doing that, it's a way of manipulating and having power. It has nothing to do with reality.
And with respect to rights, I certainly see backtracking, yes. I think that we fought for women's rights, and we fought for rights for LGBTQ communities, and won slow and steady victories over the past 50 plus years. And now we see some of those being rolled back. So I think it's absolutely right that however we can reach those communities, going there or through a program that is available nationwide, it will be meaningful not only to people who identify with us, but also to people who don't. I remember when my first professional gig was the Broadway national tour of a show called Falsettos, which was also born of the AIDS crisis, and I played the kid in that. And we were on a bus and truck or whatever, going to every town in America. And when we got to Texas, people would get up and leave, and it started discussion. And I think that is incredibly beneficial and also, difficult.
And getting people angry about trans people or abortion or whatever, it's a great way of raising money. I mean, as soon as something happens, there's a shooting, all of a sudden everybody's sending money to the NRA. And as soon as, abortion was made legal, then they started to fight abortion, and the abortion, the pro-life people, they make so much money on being pro-life, so that when they took away abortion rights, they had to find something else because they aren't making as much money from the people that are trying to stop people from having abortions. So now they're not allowed to have trans children, or they're not allowed to have health care for their, to prevent them from having HIV. So it's like, it's just a tool to make money. It has absolutely nothing to do with any morality, and it certainly has nothing to do with any compassion or belief in a higher power.
I saw a quote from you that said something to the effect of queer performing saves lives. Does a show like this act as a bulwark and serve that purpose?
When we were in London, we had this, we were in the oldest music hall, and there were some lovely people who worked there, and there was one person who worked there who was trans, and
Very awkward and shy.
and very, we never could understand if she didn't like us, or she just, we would say, oh, hello, and, she would sort of scurry away. And at the end of the run, she wrote us, I don't know, maybe a 10-page letter or something in beautiful script.
It was gorgeous.
And it, we couldn't read it because, we would start crying. So, and we still have it. And it was incredibly meaningful. And essentially, that's what she said, is that this really helped her through a lot. And I think to see the joy that anybody gets out of it, given that it's based on our experiences, is that in and of itself. It doesn't really matter what it's about or what we're trying to say with it, but just seeing that people get joy from us.
Celebrating trans and queer joy is a nice antidote to how we're presented in the media, with all of this and with all of the, hate and legislation coming toward us, and how, the statistics about trans children committing suicide, which, evidently nobody cares about. But there are plenty of people who are actually living very joyous, fulfilled lives, and that is not the part that you hear about. So I've always said, glamour is resistance. Being as happy and healthy and joyous as you can be in the face of that kind of oppression is not only just irks the shit out of them, but it is, that's what you're supposed to do when you're alive.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
Lightning talk. I have a question for Anthony. Not really a question. I would just like him to speak a little bit about his experience in Akhenaten at the Met.
Akhenaten has been a life-changing thing for me, this very minimalist opera by Philip Glass. But I think what made it so extraordinary was that it brought together all of the different parts of me. I have this somewhat academic, or desire to be academic since having gone to an undergraduate university that valued that. And it allowed me to delve into research on this pharaoh, this ancient Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. And then I find out that everybody was saying, well, was Akhenaten intersex? And was Akhenaten trying to be between man and woman when Akhenaten discovered the sun as and was Akhenaten a cult leader, or was Akhenaten a visionary? All of these questions that I felt deserved delving into from a character perspective, but also in terms of weaving a narrative and marketing the show, which is another real interest of mine. How do you sell opera to people? And could you sell something as obscure and contemporary and not a part of the canon as Philip Glass's Akhenaten, which before we did this new production had long been considered the ugly duckling of his famous trilogy, Einstein on the Beach and Satyagraha, having had more success previously. So I embarked upon unifying my voice, my performance, my intellectual intellectual curiosity and my marketing skills in trying to bring everything together. Could we talk about, the ways in which Akhenaten was a predecessor to the queer community, and in teasing out that thread, who would show up at the Metropolitan Opera? And in fact, the queer community showed up. And yes, and then how do you do that and not in any way make it just for that community, but how do you take a public that loves opera and convince them that it is grand opera in the grandest way, with great singing, incredible music, telling of stories through music, even when it's in ancient Egyptian and we don't translate it? How do you do all of that? So that was it's been a very exciting project, and it continues I was shocked that right before I came here, we finished a run in London, where the first time we did it in London, we did 7 shows. The second time we went back to the E&O, we did 8 shows. And this time they scheduled 9 shows in the biggest theater in London. And I thought, well, surely we're not going to have any success. And to sell it out again, before we even opened, 9 shows there, just shows that it has endured as something that people love. So it gives me some faith in the power of art sometimes as well.
Has it affected your career?
I think so. I think
That's why I work with them.
I think it has made me more recognizable and defined my profile as a singer. And I certainly know that no matter what else I do in my life, my obituary will read, famously Akhenaten in the 2018 whatever production. So yes, I think it has.
And the fact that you were not wearing much.
The nude entrance, which was just an idea of the director, and I said, but why? Why do you want to do that? And he said, well, you enter completely vulnerable and completely male, and we see that. And then they put the robes on, and you get decked out in the most extravagant gold. And as the opera progresses, you change that gold for a more soft, curvy, less rigid definition of gender and all of these different things. And I thought, okay, well, that's a good argument. And he said, and also the moment you step on stage, everyone will be with you from the very beginning. And
Definitely won't take their eyes off you.
Even on PBS.
Even on PBS. So yes, it has kept me in shape for the past 6 years.
So then the question I have...
Vanity, right back to it.
Right.
Vanity.
Well, you can't walk on stage like that without thinking about how you look.
Very much so. So
what about that review that guy gave in the I was there seeing it in London, and we were in the Queen's box or wherever she goes during the intermission, and it was a group of us, and this older, very grand Queen who I guess worked on production, the sets and stuff for Elton John shows, came in and he's like, he's got it all. He's got the acting chops, he's got the voice, the body, and the cock.
So that makes me... I can't resist asking you what it means to walk like an Egyptian.
Need I say more? But no, I think there was a lot of discussion about that song, actually. I think it's a joyful celebration of all that is in Egypt and all that the Egyptian culture, especially the antiquity that is taught to every school child in every place, means to the foundations of our concept of culture.
Well, sure.
And seeing those paintings, those hieroglyphs on the tombs, and seeing the way they walk is a beautiful thing. So we've always seen it as a kind of celebration, and we enjoy combining it with this other vision of it with Akhenaten.
Oops.
Anybody else? Front row. And then we have to
We can
wind it
hear
up
you.
because
Very few people made a success out of COVID, but you not only going around in your truck and singing, but you came up with other people, and you've been at Tanglewood or somewhere in the last summer singing with a group, and I just think that's very interesting that you took something that was downing everybody and upraised it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't like to sit idle, and as Viv knows, and so I was just determined that there was a way, and we found it, and then we made an album, and
I did, the first 3 months, I did weekly performances from my house that I actually made as much money off of those as I would have doing performances
Really?
at Joe's Pub, because people sent me money, you know, in Venmo, and then
did you do it by Zoom or people actually coming to your house?
No, I did it on Instagram Live and Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and people very lovely, you know, $20, $10, $5, and Joe's Pub holds 180 people, and you know, 1,000 people would watch each week. So I really expanded my fan base, but also then, after Pride, after doing, you know, 16 weeks of 4 songs a week, I was tired of that. So I had an art exhibition in Provincetown at the end of the summer. So I sat and painted for all of July and August, and those all sold out. And then I was pretty tired. And we made the record, and then we were the first act to open the Basilica in Hudson was my band. I was the first person to perform in front of 100 people since the pandemic, live. And then we reopened St. Anne's Warehouse.
with
and
Chuck
then
Schumer
a few days after
introducing
that,
us.
I reopened Joe's Pub. And then in December, Kiki and Herb reopened the Harvey Theater at BAM. So I just was ready. I never stopped working.
We called Viv New York's can opener.
I
Right?
am.
And on that happy note, I was told I needed to kind of wrap up because we have a shift change here at the crew, and they have a performance tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you. What a pleasure.
I appreciate it.